Mm-hmm. There was an interesting story about in the Times about how the White House and the campaign, the Trump campaign, are having problems, A, keeping Donald Trump on message, but B, they're having trouble coming up with a message. And, I think we were talking about this last week where, how does Obamagate help anything? Right. And part of the problem apparently they tested 20 messages against Biden, and they just cannot drive up his negatives with these focus groups, it appears.
Wow.
That they don't like, they haven't been able to figure it out. And, that's part of Biden's strategy is that he's just, but, his negatives are what they are. It's just that people don't like Trump.
Right.
They don't like Trump talking about him. There was a tremendous amount of sort of baked into the cake hatred of Hillary Clinton that was, I imagine some part of it was sort of generic misogyny. And another part of it was that there literally were people whose entire careers spent longer than I've spent doing this, talking into a microphone professionally. I've now done for 15, 16 years. But you had people who for 30 years made their money. Every single job they had was to attack Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton.
That's how Fox News was built.
That's how Rush Limbaugh was built.
Exactly.
It was all Vince Foster. And,
right.
He'd been doing it for 3 or 4 years. And it wasn't until Bill Clinton got elected, and obviously the campaign and the run-up, they hated Bill Clinton, hated him. And this is not a defense of the Clintons or Bill Clinton's policies or them as people or any of that. I'm just making an observation that there was an entire cottage industry built towards demonizing Hillary Clinton.
Monopolies built cottage. Yeah. They turned into monopolies.
Literally, it was like a doctoral program. And so by the time she ran, there was such a high level of expertise. And then there was they ran a horrible campaign. And on top of that, they were, and I think, look, the Comey investigation was a function of that cottage industry. And Crooked Hillary was an example of that cottage industry. Steve Bannon had figured out the whole thing on how to do that. And they're just not that toehold with Joe Biden.
Well, it doesn't help when Joe Biden's like, "Oh, if you don't like me, don't vote for me."
Look, I don't think this is a case of Joe Biden doing anything right. I think it's just a question of it probably helps that he's a white guy in terms of, the toeholds that a guy like Donald Trump can find in attacking him. Right. I suspect that with a woman and with a person of color, Black, Hispanic, Donald Trump would have found toeholds maybe to trigger some of these, these Republican talking points, which is not to say that person couldn't win, but I do think that, at least in terms of them settling on a strategy, they would have settled on a strategy if it was, Kamala Harris, or if it was Elizabeth Warren, or if it was Cory Booker.
Right.
They would have settled on a strategy by now, and they can't seem to find a strategy with Joe Biden because
it's interesting because that's why Obamagate, it was clearly a form of racial, reminding certain folks of the injustices that happened in the Obama administration. But I actually think if you've noticed the right wing, with exception, to just covering the news, and Megyn Kelly, who's got her own agenda of becoming relevant again, they didn't really touch the Tara Reade story much, and it died out. And I think partly because they're sexist. I think there's a portion of the voters that they are trying to win over that just don't care, don't think it's a big deal, and in a weird way, deeply ingrained misogyny, may actually think that Joe Biden's like a great guy for it.
Yep. I think I think they're like, he's not, taking any guff from them. I think that helps him. I think probably on some level, there's the Trump people are like, this might be a little bit toxic for us to do this directly. I suspect it's going to come up later. I suspect, but I don't see why it will have any more traction than it did this time. I mean,
the Hunter Biden thing's not really working because of the investor. I mean, I still think it's going to come up.
They tested that without a doubt. But the Hunter Biden thing takes him off of China, and they want to try and tie it into China, and they haven't been able to tie him into China in the same way that they thought they were going to be able to. And I think the thing is that they're going to try with Obama. They're going to try this Obamagate. They're going to make it like Joe Biden was a stooge for Obama. I think one of the things that we can anticipate them coming out with is this notion of like, here's a guy who was like, carrying water for a black guy.
That's right.
And
they're going to make him look weak.
They're going to try and make him look weak.
He's
and
tried
like
to run for president all these times. He can't get through. The Democrats are putting him up because they can't find anybody else.
Here's the problem with that, I think, for them on some level. Anecdotally, I've seen no data to support this, but anecdotally, it's an interesting theory that one of the reasons why African Americans took to Joe Biden so easily in terms of is that here's a guy who was in the Senate for 30 years, whatever it was, an old white guy who was willing to have a black boss and did so very loyally. And now I don't know. It never occurred to me that would have any resonance. And I have no, short of one or two people saying this to me in person and having read it once on Twitter, it certainly sounds like it could be something that people respect about Joe Biden, that he, I don't know
how you measure that, though. I mean, I
don't know how you measure that. I don't know that you can, but I do know that, there's the sentiment of there was an era, I think this era is probably still around in some sectors, less so in others, where it was like, men had trouble having a female boss.
Oh, absolutely.
And the ability of a man to have a female boss was considered a positive attribute by other women. And fairly obvious reasons why one would have that reaction. So I don't know, but I don't think it's going to be effective. I just find it fascinating that they keep searching around for this stuff.